Access to Democracy is made possible thanks to the following organizations. Sheridan & Dulas, PA, a family and criminal defense law firm that has been serving clients in Dakota County and throughout Minnesota for over 40 years. Ranked a Tier 1 Best Law Firm by U.S. News and World Report every year since 2009. Sheridan & Dulas are here to help you in your most difficult life circumstances. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Distillery was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at their facility. If you're interested in learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check their website and plan a visit to tour their facility and taste their spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Access to Democracy. I'm your host, Steve Francisco. It's my pleasure to welcome to our studio today a new guest who is going to talk about a topic which is very dear to my heart. We're going to be talking today about commercial aviation, plane spotting, and specifically the activity at our own Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. Alex Redding, who is the founder of MSP Airport Live, welcome to Access to Democracy.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Good to have you here. So you and I actually ran into each other while I was indulging in my hobby of plane spotting at the airport viewing area at MSP. Tell us, where is that airport viewing area?
So the aircraft viewing area is at the end of Cargo Road, so it's right in the middle of the airport, and it's in a really unique spot because where it sits in relation to where the traffic is coming and going at MSP Airport, a lot of plane spotters at major airport hubs like LAX and Chicago, they would really kill for a spot like that. And it's a very unique spot because you are roughly 1,000 feet away. And I did the measurements. You're about 1,000 feet away from the main runway at MSP Airport, 12 right, 30 left.
You're about as close as you can legally get to the airplanes taking off and landing.
Well, even taxiing too. Taxiway Mike, which kind of goes along the other side of the viewing area, that's only 300 feet away. That is super close. I mean, the only other spot that comes to mind where you can get that close at a public viewing area at an airport would probably be in Manchester over in the UK. And, not many airports in the United States can lay claim to such a really awesome piece of real estate that MSP Airport has. And so you can really get close and connected, and not only do you see things up close, and not only do you really just kind of sit back and take it in just from the visual perspective of being right up there, next to these giants, but you get to hear it and feel it too. When those big heavies take off, it's a visceral sensation.
So
and I think that really brings people out to the viewing area time and time.
I think our viewers are beginning to get a sense of what today's program is, but tell us specifically, what is MSP Airport Live? What do you do, and who is your audience?
Yeah, so MSP Airport Live is a YouTube channel that brings the excitement of all the airport action here at MSP to all the aviation enthusiasts within our local community, and also opens it up to people not just within the United States, but globally within the continent, just kind of, again, around the globe. And, we've had viewers, as far as India, as far as Sao Paulo, Brazil. We've had a regular viewer from New Zealand, just kind of from all over. And it's been really cool to see just some of the people that have kind of come out and shared information with us that have been a part of our community, and which is really fulfilling for me because when I started this project back in 2022, when a couple of AvGeek friends of mine and I decided that, hey, let's do this. I think that this would be fun, and it kind of started out as a casual conversation at the viewing area, and we were kind of chatting amongst ourselves. It was a summer day. I think it was either in August or September. I can't remember the month, but I know that it was kind of, in the evening. We were spotting, we were kind of hanging out and chatting, and we just kind of were joking around about, hey, would it be cool if we had, like a live plane spotting show here like LAX or another airport? And, at first it was kind of more of a, okay, that's kind of a fun thing to kind of, joke about, but then kind of, it was like, okay, well, actually, I've got the know-how and I've got the muscle to make it work. I have a pretty extensive background as a media professional. And, I know that I'm only 27 years old, but I've had a lot of experience within that time ever since getting involved with live television in my community where I grew up in Bloomington. And since then, it's just been a great ride.
So when did you become specifically interested in, we call this hobby plane spotting, watching aircraft moving, landing, taking off, taxiing? When did you become interested in plane spotting?
So I became interested in plane spotting when I was really little. And I grew up in Bloomington, and where I grew up, the house I grew up in was actually underneath the departure path for runway 22. That's the crosswind runway at MSP Airport. And Northwest Airlines, they had a pretty awesome 747 fleet. And when they were heavy, when they were going to Tokyo or they're going to other destinations in Asia, they are loaded with fuel, they're loaded with passengers, and that was a busy, popular service. And not to mention the cargo too. So those jets were heavy. They required the longest runway, that crosswind runway at MSP Airport, to take off more often than not. And that would mean every afternoon when those international departures, when they were leaving for Tokyo, guess where they were going right by? They were buzzing right over my head, right over my house. And that was just so cool. And so I think then at that point, that kind of stirred my interest in aviation a lot. And also knowing that at the time, this is back in the 2000s, my parents, they were friends with, somebody who was a pilot for Northwest. And, that was kind of special and cool. And
in my case, my interest in plane spotting goes back to my own dad, who was a mechanic at the old Northwest Airlines. So I remember going out there when I was a child in the late 1960s, and it was a big event if a jet took off. Now our airport has grown exponentially. Air traffic in Minnesota around the world has grown significantly. We should make clear to our viewers too, your program has no affiliation with the Metropolitan Airports Commission, no affiliation commercially with any airlines, right? You've done this on your own to bring the excitement of aviation onto people's computer screens.
Exactly. I mean, this is truly a passion project of mine, and it's a creative outlet for me that I've been able to use my skills to really bring people a means to something that they find valuable, which is aviation and watching airplanes. And it's really a fascinating thing. I mean, when you look at all of the moving parts that make a several 100-ton jetliner get airborne right off a mile-long strip of tarmac, it's pretty incredible. And just to see it every time, it never gets old for me. And I know like people like you, that connection and that experience, that never gets old. And just for me to use my creative abilities that God's blessed me with, and the experience that I've been able to have over the years, and just to be able to use that and put that to use for my friends that also watch it, and everyone in the MSP aviation community and abroad too, has just been really cool. And so to be able to provide people with something that's really cool, I think that brings me a lot of value, and the connections I've been able to make too as a result of doing this. And that really just to me brings a sense of fulfillment and excitement every time I do it, just because I know that it's going to be an awesome show. It's bringing people closer to something that they really enjoy.
How many subscribers do you currently have, and do you find the number of subscribers is growing?
The number of subscribers has grown exponentially. In fact, right now, at the time of this recording, the total subscriber count for MSP Airport Live is over 8,500 subscribers. We have...
And they're not just people here in Minnesota, as you mentioned earlier. They could be people anywhere in the world who are on a computer, right?
Yep, watching from a computer, watching from a tablet, a phone, even a television screen. In fact, according to our YouTube metrics, a good chunk of our viewers, in fact, the majority of viewers that watch our show are watching it from a television and or watching it from their computer. Yeah. So actually a smaller percentage are watching it from their phone or their tablet. I just think that that's really cool to point out. But the show is getting a whole lot of attention. I know recently in the events that unfolded with Delta Flight 56, having extreme turbulence over Wyoming, needing to divert to Minneapolis.
Medical emergencies
that
on
medical
board.
emergency, yep, that left 25 people injured significantly. 7 of those, I believe, were crew. And the fact that they were treated for those significant injuries and released the next day from our medical system is just wonderful. But to be there to capture that emergency landing, that made national headlines. I mean, a lot of the major networks carried it. To be able to be in a position to really capture something important, that was happening in the community, and really just other things that were happening in the airport that day. And
I think this is a good point to give our viewers. We're going to insert at this point about a 1-minute clip of MSP Airport Live so that viewers can get a better feel for what it is your program is all about. So we'll let viewers take a look at that right now.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota for some live plane spotting. And as we switch it around to the departure end of our notables, as mentioned, Ocean 461 Heavy, Ocean the call sign for Discover, will be headed back to Frankfurt here in moments. We'll also have Delta 160 Heavy getting out of here to Amsterdam with the A350. All right, this is another one of our notable flights. It's our UPS A300 from Chicago Rockford coming in on 1 to your right.
55, 56 Heavy, 2 right turns, Whiskey, Mike, Tango, 2, on to point 9, 6.
All right, let's take another look at our Chicago Rockford arrival.
Tower Delta 2288, visual 12 right.
And I'm sure folks found that to be very interesting. I want to ask you, Alex, what is it about our airport, specifically about Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, that makes it such a good place to do a program such as yours?
I think it's just how connected the community is, how deep the roots of aviation go. When you look at aviation history, I mean, Minneapolis-St. Paul, that was home base for Northwest Airlines for decades, and that alone, when you look at Northwest Airlines at the peak of its power, it was one of the top 5 airlines in the world as far as like how big they were and just the presence that they had established. And you have such passionate aviation enthusiasts that have a background with Northwest, or even that just our aviation fans of just the significance of what the Twin Cities meant for aviation and what it continues to provide. Just from an enthusiast perspective, we have an airport that actively promotes plane spotting and community engagement, which is amazing because not many international airports in the United States see it that way. And we're very lucky and very fortunate to have an airport that sees the value in what we do, and also to have a community that is able to have a space, that the airport has provided, such as the viewing area, to foster connection within the community. And I have seen, friendships and, connections and all sorts of amazing things, come about as a result of having a space to do so, and that being the viewing area for aviation enthusiasts, at MSP Airport and within our own community. So it's gone far beyond just having a space to gather, to come and connect and enjoy aviation and just to soak up the sights and sounds of it, but also to connect with other people. And I think that
we should mention too that because MSP is a major hub for Northwest successor Delta Airlines, they have hundreds of flights a day coming and going out of MSP. Home base for Sun Country Airlines, our own Minnesota-grown airline, plus not just the commercial operations, but occasional military operations. We have the 133rd Tactical Air Wing, Air National Guard based at MSP. So you'll see C-130 aircraft coming and going, other military aircraft, plus a large cargo operation right off Cargo Road near where you do your program. Doesn't that also help increase the variety of different aircraft that you're going to see coming and going at our airport?
It certainly does, and I'll tell you what, the cargo heavies that arrive in the evening certainly add a nice little touch of spice to all of the Delta jets that we see, and all the Sun Country aircraft too. I mean, not that they aren't great to look at or spot, but just to add the cargo variety and the variety of what is being carried on that aircraft, you kind of get a snapshot of everything that a major international airport is about. Yeah, I know it's not the size of O'Hare, or it's as busy as O'Hare, or it's as flashy as LAX is with all these international airlines, but I think the thing that makes MSP number one in my mind is that we have a snapshot of everything. We're closer to it. We're more connected, and I think that just kind of drives the whole spirit of plane spotting at MSP. And those cargo heavies, they will use Taxiway Mike, as we talked about earlier. It's only 300 feet away from the viewing area. When you see this ginormous MD-11 or A300 arrive from UPS, and they're just right there.
Yeah.
it's that experience.
You're close enough to the
Exactly.
taxiway, you can sometimes even see the pilots as they're taxiing by, correct?
Yeah, I've thought about giving them a high five, but I'm like, nah, I don't know.
What is the largest aircraft that you have ever seen land or take off at MSP?
The largest airplane that I have seen take off and land at MSP is without question the largest cargo aircraft in the world. That's the Antonov 124. And that aircraft is so cool, not just because it happens to be the largest cargo carrying aircraft in the world, but the fact that it's actually a Cold War relic, actually. It was built and designed by the Antonov Design Bureau in the Soviet Ukraine. And the fact that that Cold War aircraft is still circling the globe on whatever mission they're contracted to do, I think is pretty incredible. And just to see a piece of flying ginormity and history all kind of bundled into one package, and the fact that they made that supply and refueling stop at MSP on their way to California back in March, that was incredible. And the arrival was amazing. The departure in the morning, I would say, was even more incredible because they took off right next to the viewing area. Those buzzsaw sounding engines were great, and all that smoke too, all of the the dirty jet exhaust as well. That was really cool to see.
I
It's
actually was out there and saw the Antonov take off
nice.
myself. Word gets
Yeah.
around pretty quickly in the aviation. You called it AvGeek, aviation geeks like myself, yourself, and those of us who follow commercial aviation. And when we hear of things such as the Antonov is going to be taking off, or recently we had an example, a Lufthansa A380, they refer to it as a superjumbo jet, double-decker, 4-engine plane, doesn't normally come into Minneapolis-St. Paul, but what happened recently? Why did a Lufthansa A380 show up at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport?
So that's a very good question, and the A380 is not an aircraft that MSP Airport sees very often. It's basically our version of Halley's Comet. I mean, we almost never see it, never get it, because there is not a route or an airline that has such a demand from another destination from Minneapolis or any route, to and from Minneapolis that would constitute the use of such a ginormous airplane. But the reason that it visited Minneapolis-St. Paul was actually for a medical reason. So according to what I heard from the ATC or air traffic control transcripts and from what the pilots and everyone was communicating just over frequency was that there was an infant that was running a really high fever on board, and it was getting very serious. And so thankfully they were able to get the airplane down nice and safely, and oh my gosh, they got out of there super quick. I've seen diversions before, and it usually takes a little bit of time to turn around the aircraft before they're going back to their destination after making a quick pit stop at MSP, but that was just about the fastest turnaround I'd ever seen.
We should say this airplane was en route from Frankfurt, Germany to Denver, I believe, Denver, Colorado, and they diverted here.
Munich to Denver.
Or Munich to Denver, yeah.
Yep, so it was en route from Munich to Denver, and they, over Wisconsin, they started descending to Minneapolis, and right as I was getting out of the shower, a friend of mine texted me and said, hey, there's an A380 coming in. I'm like, no, there's not. We don't get them here. And even if we did, diversions are so rare. And he's like, no, look, it's diverting. And I go and pull up my flight radar app, and I'm like,
he's coming
made
in
me
here.
an idiot. So I'm like, I'm trying to hustle, get around, and I end up making it to MSP on time, just before they left, just to see that departure. And, they were able to, take care of the situation that they were dealing with.
Yeah.
The reason for the diversion, they were able to take care of it pretty quickly. And they did such a fantastic job, both the Lufthansa crew and the airport commission and the emergency response to it. They were able to get that aircraft out of there so quick.
On their way to Denver.
Exactly. Right? And they were able to land in Denver. And just to be there to see the departure of that huge monster. And what surprised me about seeing the A380 for the first time was how quiet it was. Mm-hmm. Even though they were so close to the action of the viewing area, that was just about the quietest big jet takeoff I'd ever heard. Yeah. I'm like, what? And it was really slow at first to move, but it doesn't need a whole lot of speed. Those huge wings, right, give it such incredible lift. And then when towards the end of the runway, when they finally rotated and they got into the air, that was an incredible sight.
We should mention, besides medical diversions that happen occasionally, probably more frequently we see weather-related diversions, don't we? For example, when a severe line of thunderstorms blew through the Chicago area, we often get diversions of international carriers that end up at our airport, right? So you get a little excited when you hear that there are thunderstorms closing in on places like Chicago or Denver.
Well, especially strong thunderstorms. I mean, Denver, not so much, but
More
Chicago, because of how close we are in proximity to another major international airport like Chicago is. And if we get flights that come in from the northwest or the west, and if there are lines of thunderstorms just slamming Chicago, and like what happened earlier this week, actually, on Monday, for example, and I feel bad for the people that had to deal with that weather down there, because that's just not fair. That's nasty. But what it ended up doing was it caused such significant disruption to all these different air carriers and their routes and flights coming in. And so we have sometimes, a lot of aircraft that, at once, or maybe a few might divert. It just depends. But we will, for aircraft that, simply, can't divert to another airport, or that are coming from a direction where MSP is kind of, the most convenient, pit stop for a while before that weather blows through. Yep, they're going to come here. And so I know that this year alone, MSP Airport Live was able to document Korean Air Cargo, a diversion from Anchorage that they came in. We were able to kind of document them leaving kind of the next day after they came in, and as well as China Southern Cargo, one of their 777 freighters. We were able to capture that on the show at least twice. And so it's really cool to kind of see stuff that, flies into Minneapolis, that doesn't come here on the regular, and so those kind of events, they kind of cause the AvGeek community around here to be in a little bit of a buzz. And
well,
so,
and
for good reason though, too, it's exciting.
We're living in a time where the advances in aircraft technology now. We have an airplane. My wife and I took a trip to Africa earlier this year. We flew to Atlanta, and then nonstop from Atlanta, Georgia, to Johannesburg, South Africa, on Delta Airlines on an Airbus A350. It's not unusual now for long-range airliners to be able to stay in the air 17, 18 hours. We're talking about the A350 and the Boeing 787. There are probably some new aircraft going to be coming down the road in a few years that will be able to stay up even longer than that.
Yeah, it's interesting to see where the aviation technology is going, but I do think that there is too great a range for an aircraft, though. As impressive of stats as we're seeing on these wide-body aircraft that can now do these ultra-long-haul flights, how far is too far and how long is too long?
Will passengers be willing to sit on an airplane 24 hours? Yeah. But literally, I think I read somewhere, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought I read that pretty much no place on Earth is more than 2 stops away now.
Yeah,
because of the range
incredible.
of these airplanes, what pilots refer to as the legs. The plane has long legs and can fly long distance. This summer, right now, actually, we have major construction, or I should say reconstruction, going on of runway 30 left, 12 right at MSP Airport. One of the major runways right next to where you do your program. Is that going to be affecting your coverage with MSP Airport Live? Are you going to have to relocate for a while, or will you still be able to capture action from your current location?
That's a really good question, and it's a question that, so Michael Larson, who helps me kind of manage the channel, and we've been going back and forth in conversation, kind of figuring out how we were going to, tackle this. And another friend of mine that helps me do it, Logan Justice, he and I have also been talking about it. And, for the time being, to kind of answer the question, we're not sure how much this is going to impact our streaming. We do know that it has had a pretty big impact so far, just with the runway configurations not being optimal to use the viewing area as a good spot, to be close enough to the action, or to be able to see, enough of it to really constitute a live show. It's been difficult just because of the operations patterns that they've been running, but that's what happens sometimes, and we're certainly working on something right now as to where we can kind of get back up and running for the time being. But if they run runway 4 departures and runway 35 arrivals, you bet your bottom dollar will be at the viewing area catching it, if it's on a day that I'm available and that we're able to do a stream. So
right.
Yeah, we're certainly able to do a stream. It's just a certain set of conditions have to fall in place during this interesting time in order to be able to do a live broadcast. And
how often do you do your live broadcasts, Alex? Does it vary? You're not on a set schedule, are you, or are you?
I'm not, but I try to be.
Yeah.
And typically I'll go for a weekend show, and typically that's a Sunday.
Yep.
And I'll go for a midweek, which is typically a Wednesday. And the reason why it's a Sunday or a Wednesday is because Sundays and Wednesdays have really excellent international traffic variety at MSP Airport. So part of it is due to my availability, and the other half is due in part to just the different variety that we get. And for example, on Wednesdays, we get KLM to start the show, Big Blue. I love seeing them all the time. We've got Discover, which is kind of keeping the seat warm for Lufthansa because Lufthansa has some fleet shortages that's impacted the Minneapolis-St. Paul service from
And those
Frankfurt.
flights go to Frankfurt. Right.
Yep, and Discover, who they took over, is their low-cost subsidiary airline. And by the way, the inside of those aircraft are nearly identical to Lufthansa's business class or coach class product that they fly. And so it's a worthy replacement just for the time being. And it's really cool to see a new airline, even though that we know it's just an interim solution. It's a stopgap for Lufthansa, but just even see that come in here, is cool because we haven't before.
Yeah.
And the only other time that they were in here to Minneapolis-St. Paul was due to a diversion because toilets were backing up. And I cannot imagine the horrendous experience on board for those.
Not a good problem to have. We talked earlier about the growth of international flights out of our airport.
Yep.
We're at a point now where we have pretty much, especially during the summer season, we have daily flights to London Heathrow, Paris Charles de Gaulle, Amsterdam Schiphol, Iceland to Reykjavik, I believe, Keflavik, Rome, Italy, seasonal service with Delta, Tokyo, Haneda Airport with Delta Airlines, Seoul's Incheon Airport in South Korea. And of course, during the winter, we see an acceleration of activity with flights to Mexico and throughout the Caribbean. A lot of those are Delta and Sun Country flights, and also sometimes charter operations, right? So there's a lot more international activity at our airport than many people might realize.
Yeah, and just to kind of further illustrate that, so a popular aviation live streamer who I had the pleasure of meeting, Peter Solarzano from LA Flights Live, he came here in February, and he really picked a doozy of a weekend because it was during a weekend where we got some pretty heavy snowfall. We had a snowstorm that kind of blew through, and it was cold. It was very balmy, like 14 degrees or whatever it was. So, I mean, yeah, hey, welcome to Minnesota. And first time being in here from Los Angeles, and he's like, I did not realize how cold it was going to be in here.
We'll see if he comes back. Tell him to come back in the summertime when the weather's better. And we should mention, we're down to just about less than a minute here. We should mention, you have a great program here. We certainly want people to go. Where can they go to see your program again?
So they can go to YouTube, and they can go to youtube.com/@MSP Airport Live, or just search MSP Airport Live on YouTube. Look for the red tail. We're also on Instagram. We're on X as well. We're also looking at doing other social media platforms too, just to kind of diversify just where we're putting our content. But our handle stays the same, @MSP Airport Live on all of those.
Alex Redding, congratulations on MSP Airport Live. I'm a fan of the show. I'm a subscriber. And as we mentioned earlier, I've met you at the airport at the viewing area. So our viewers may find here's a potential new hobby for you at MSP Airport Live. Thank you for joining us as our guest today on Access to Democracy, and good luck with your program.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on. And yeah.